Welcome back to Star Wars Shovelware, my name's Luke, and today on the channel we're going to be taking a look at action arcade wrestling on the Nintendo Switch, a classic arcade wrestling game inspired by the wrestlers of the 90s, in which you take to the ring as one of many unusual wrestlers to lay the smackdown on your opponents in a bunch of classic wrestling modes. But how does action arcade wrestling compare to other games in the genre on the Switch, such as Retromania Wrestling or Wrestling Empire? Well, hit that like button, subscribe to be notified about future content, and let's find out. So action arcade wrestling is exactly as the title says, an arcade wrestling game, and so it doesn't actually have a story or career mode for you to play through. While the other titles I've mentioned either let you create your own wrestler and play through a choice-driven career mode, or in the case of Retromania Wrestling, follow the story of a legendary wrestler returning to the ring, action arcade wrestling does away with all of that and just sticks to the classic exhibition mode. Now I have to admit that this is a bit of a shame really, as I quite enjoy just having the option of letting the game take over and generate the scenarios for each match, as well as the character driven plot lines which make each wrestler feel at least somewhat unique. With the absence of a storyline, none of the game's characters really have a personality though, and so it's all down to you to just imagine what they're like and make up your own plot lines. But one thing this game does have over the other two is its extensive content creation tool. Now while Wrestling Empire does allow you to create your own characters and wrestling alliances, I felt that it was somewhat limited in its customization options. Action Arcade Wrestling's Wrestle Lab on the other hand is extremely versatile, allowing you to create any character you can dream up, and you're able to head into the custom content menu to download hundreds of different characters and rings that other people have created. However, if you're wanting to create your own custom content, unfortunately you're going to need a PC, as the Wrestle Lab software is only actually available on Steam. Now, the software itself allows you to customise every inch of your wrestler. It's pretty easy to use, providing you with sliders to adjust the shape, size and location of all your wrestlers' body parts, and I was able to come up with this absolute abortion in a matter of minutes, who I then went ahead and uploaded to the cloud and was easily able to import into the game. Decking out your character is a matter of selecting from a bunch of prefabs which you can then change the colour of or import your own textures for, and as well as being able to fully customise your character's movesets, you can also use the software to design your own arenas, which are just as easy to import into the game. Now while having no career mode at all is one downside to action arcade wrestling, having the ability to actually create and import any character in existence, apart from those being based on Nintendo characters of course, is a definite positive. It allows you to set up the matches you've always dreamed of, such as having a bunch of classic wrestlers go up against Spider-Man, Optimus Prime, Tommy from the Power Rangers and a Pepsi soda machine. You're just going to need to have a bit of an active imagination when it comes to the reasons for their beef with one another. So gameplay with this one, and as expected we get some classic arcade wrestling here, though the game does put a bit of a twist on things by straying away from straight up wrestling by adding in a touch of fantasy, as characters are able to shoot laser beams from their eyeballs or electrocute you Emperor Palpatine style. The large number of game modes open up plenty of options for matchups and include everything from one-on-one bouts to 3v3 tag team matches and 10-man battle royales, though the game is missing a few of my favourites like Hell in a Cell and TLC, which alongside the lack of a campaign can result in matches all feeling a little bit samey, and all match types are actually fought in the ring, so unfortunately there's no going backstage and running people over with a forklift truck. Now when it comes to the wrestling itself, the game's mechanics and control schemes are kept very simple, which I actually kind of liked, as I have played plenty of wrestling games before where they were far too complex, and that just kind of takes away from the fun of it all. Your movesets in the game consist of standard heavy and light attacks, which you're able to use to stun your opponent if enough of them land, and you also get heavy and light grapple attacks, performed by either pressing or holding the grapple button to tie up with your opponent, and then pressing it again either on its own or alongside a directional button to perform a grapple move. If you're looking to gang up on someone, there are also opportunities to perform double team moves, and alongside these you also have the ability to move your opponent around, whip them into ropes, bounce off the ropes yourself and perform running moves, and ascend the turnbuckle to perform some high flying manoeuvres, and all of these are also very easy to perform. Now, where I found things did get a little awkward is when it comes to targeting different opponents, as while you do have a focus button allowing you to switch between them, for some reason this didn't always seem to work for me, and there are also no markers under players to indicate which one is yours or who you're targeting, which does make it a little difficult when playing hectic 10-man battle royale brawls. All in all though, I'd say that the game has a pretty intuitive combat system, and alongside the wrestling we also have the option to throw in some weapons into the mix, which you'll be glad to hear also includes a lightsaber. And one thing that I thought was quite unique about the game is that it also has a power-up system, where you're able to collect power-ups that appear every so often to boost your character's offensive and defensive stats. By performing a grapple move on your opponent, you can then steal these power-ups from them, and the power-ups can also be sacrificed to instantly release you from pins or submission moves, which does add another tactical element to the gameplay. Now, winning a match depends on the game mode, but it usually involves one of three things: pinning your opponent, forcing them into submission, or in some cases tossing your opponent out of the ring to eliminate them. And like most wrestling games, your success of actually doing so relies on your opponent's stamina being low enough, seen as green bars around the outside of the screen. Now, I found that the matches in Action Arcade Wrestling were actually much shorter in comparison to other wrestling games I've played, with stamina bars able to be drained much quicker, which is good if you've only got a few minutes to spare, but it does also mean that you can literally have your ass handed to you in a couple of minutes, especially on the harder difficulties. Overall though, as a fan of classic wrestling games, I quite enjoyed Action Arcade Wrestling. It has a good amount of customization, contains most of the game modes you're going to want to play, and while the wrestling itself can be a little janky at times and it's a little less flashy when compared to premium titles, it's a pretty enjoyable game so far as indie wrestling games go. The game does support up to 4 players locally, but unfortunately there's no online multiplayer at the moment, and while playing on your own can be fun for a while, I do feel like it really could have done with a career mode, especially for all those solo players out there. So on the graphics front, the game has gone for more of a cartoony look to its visuals, opting to add some additional cel shading to both its characters and arenas, and I think this really worked well with the more over-the-top fantasy elements of the gameplay. We also get plenty of neon, which I'm always a big fan of, and the special effects all look decent, though the crowd is a little lacking, with it constantly being bathed in shadows. Audio wise, things are kept pretty simple. We get some cheering and jeering of the crowd, some decent sound effects for the moves and abilities, and there is actually a fully voiced tutorial in the game which does a good job of showing you the ropes. Finally, the game's music is pretty much a generic blend of heavy metal tracks, which don't sound wholly original, but they do fit well with the gameplay and I can't really complain about them. So when it comes to the game's performance on the Switch, Action Arcade Wrestling holds up well. I didn't notice any real frame rate drops even in the 10-man battle royales, but the game does completely freeze up for a few seconds whenever a new player appears in the game's Battle Rumble mode. Issues wise, I've already mentioned the difficulty I had when trying to target individual characters, but aside from this, getting up from the mat when you've taken a beatdown can take a lifetime of button mashing, and the game is generally a little bit rough around the edges with the animation of its moves, with characters often clipping through each other, or just doing things like this. Overall though, Action Arcade Wrestling is a decent wrestling game. It offers plenty of customization for those looking to create their own characters or replicate any character that they can think of, and while it could be considered to be a little bit overpriced due to it not really having much to offer to the single player, in my mind it's still a decent budget option. When it comes to my own personal rating of the game, I'm going to be giving Action Arcade Wrestling 3 out of 5 stars. If you're looking for a wacky arcade style wrestling game to play with a bunch of mates, then Action Arcade Wrestling is a decent option. Though if you're a solo player looking for a more career driven experience, then I recommend checking out the other 2 games that I mentioned, which I also reviewed on the channel, and I'll leave my links to these reviews down in the description box below. And so that about does it for this review of Action Arcade Wrestling on the Nintendo Switch. As always, make sure to hit that like button if it helped you out. Let me know what you thought of the game and what your favourite wrestling games are on the Switch in the comments section below. And if you enjoy my content and watch me regularly but are not yet subscribed, then please consider doing so. For now though, as always, I just want to thank you all once again for watching, and until next time, take care of yourselves and game on.